Translation. I have thus explained the truth of the Pancha Tattva. One who hears this explanation increases in knowledge of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Pancha Tattva is a very important factor in understanding Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There are sahajiyas who, not knowing the importance of the Pancha Tattva, concoct their own slogans, such as Bhajanitai Gaur Radhe Sham, Japa Hari Krishna Hari Ram, or Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Hari Krishna Hari Ram, Sri Radhe Govinda. Such chants may be good poetry, but they cannot help us to go forward in devotional service. In such chants, there are also many discrepancies which need not be discussed here. Strictly speaking, when chanting the names of the Pancha Tattva, one should fully offer his obeisances. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. By such chanting, one is blessed with the competency to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra without offense. When chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, one should also chant it fully. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One should not foolishly adopt any of the slogans concocted by imaginative devotees. If one actually wants to derive the effects of chanting, one must strictly follow the great acharyas. This is confirmed in the Mahabharata, Mahajana Yena Gata Sapanta. The real path of progress is that which is traversed by great acharyas and authorities. And in the next verse, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami confirms or reiterates, while chanting the Pancha Tattva Maha Mantra, one must chant the names of Sri Chaitanya, Nityananda, Advaita, Gadadhar, and Srivas with their many devotees. This is the process. So we are fortunate to be sitting here at Bhaktivedanta Manor, and as indicated by your responses when I raised my arms, you know the full Panchatattva mantra and the full Hare Krishna Maha mantra. But our acharyas have fought very hard to establish certain principles that we may take for granted. after the disappearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, many deviant sects emerged in Bengal and Orissa, which claimed to follow Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but which actually deviated from his instructions and examples in different significant ways. And the whole of Bengal was plunged into darkness, disarray. There was debauchery going on in the name of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And intelligent people equated the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with being very bad people. And it was Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur who really worked very hard to reestablish the proper understanding of the teachings and principles of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he enumerated 13 deviant sects. And he explained what their faults were, and he opposed them. Now, this information may sound like a quaint bit of East Indian religious history. But it's important that we know this history because the same tendencies to deviate are always there. And deviations can actually, creep into our own minds and our own association. So we should know how our acharyas identify the deviations and how they fought against them. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was a very prominent figure in Bengal and Orissa. And in response to his prayers, Krishna sent him a son, Bimal Prasad Datta, but he is known to us as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And together they practiced and preached. So at that time, say the early 1900s, there was a person named Radha Raman Charan Das Babaji. He was from a good family. He was highly educated. And he gave up his comfortable life and lucrative prospects to follow Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he, in terms of his personal habits, he was of good character, and people respected him. But at a certain stage, he, we would say, concocted this slogan, Bhajanitai Gaur Radhe Shyam, Japa Hare Krishna Hare Ram. And earlier, before he did that, he enjoyed quite friendly relations with Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And he would often visit Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and sometimes he would visit Saraswati Thakur, and sometimes Saraswati Thakur would visit him. But when he came up with this concocted mantra, the relations became strained. Jai Shishigor Nitai Ki Jai. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati asked him where he got this new mantra. And he said it came to him when he was in trance. So there was quite a discussion or argument, and but he held on to this idea. Now, as Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, in such chants there are also many discrepancies which need not be discussed here. Here means in the purport, not in our assembly. In our assembly we will discuss them. Now, so their idea is Bhaja Nitai Gaur Radhe Shyam. It means you should worship Nitai Gaur and Radhe Shyam and do japa of Hare Krishna, Hare Ram. So they had the erroneous idea that the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra should not be chanted loudly. So this is just one of the many faults embedded in their theory. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur countered this with so many evidences. First is, but anyway, I don't really know how much time we do have to discuss these details. But let's suffice to say that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chanted the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra loudly. Srila Rupa Goswami, who was a personal witness to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, he has written it. And it's just very clear that he did chant Hare Krishna Maha Mantra loudly. And he requested others to chant loudly. So, at a certain stage, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had a very, you could say, extensive discussion or debate with Radha Raman Charan Das Babaji. And he admitted that it was wrong of him to have concocted this mantra or slogan and to have propagated it. But he didn't have the strength to withdraw it. And according to the accounts, soon thereafter he became mentally deranged, and he died. So his main disciple was Ram Das Babaji. And Ram Das Babaji, he held on to this ditty and he kept propagating it. And Yes, one point I think I should mention about Charandas Babaji is that he would manifest extreme symptoms of ecstasy to the point that people thought he's like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu reincarnate. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur observed him when he was manifesting his so-called ecstatic symptoms. And he approached him and said that, I've watched what you're doing, and what you're doing is play acting, and you should stop this cheating. So our acharyas are very forthright. I mean, no compromise. So anyway, Ramdas Babaji, he had a mutt in Jagannath Puri. And his devotees, they would deliberately pass by Sri Purushottama Mutt, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's mutt in Puri. And they would deliberately pass by and chant, Bhajanita Gaurade Sham Japa Hare Krishna Hare Ram. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's disciples, they installed a tin drum, and whenever those followers of Ramdas Babaji came by chanting their ditthi, someone would beat the drum, and then all the devotees from the ashram would come out and have, ecstatic Hare Krishna Maha Mantra Kirtan and drown out the Hare Krishna Hare Ram concocted mantra. And then eventually Ramdas Babaji told them to take another route. They would pass by there on the way to the Tota Gopinath temple. He told them to take another route and not disturb them. So, now, I didn't plan to say this, but I think I will, because I feel it's my duty. But Srila Prabhupada had a god brother named O.B.L. Kapoor, Aul Bihari Kapoor. He was initiated as Adi Keshava Das by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur departed, he felt sort of at a loss. So he was looking for someone else to take shelter of. And somehow, he came to a devotee named, I think, Gauranga, something Das Babaji, something like that, who was a disciple of Ramdas Babaji. And this O.B.L. Kapoor, he's written other books, but he wrote a book called Saints of Vraja, which is somewhat popular among some ISKCON devotees. It's full of very sort of romantic tales of mystical experiences and so on. And I read some of it. Someone actually sort of suggested that I read it, so I read some of it. And he has concealed some very important facts. For example, reading that book, you wouldn't know that that line chanted this concocted slogan. There are many other things like that in the book. And there are other people in the book. And in one place, he... I'm not saying it's untrue, but, he said that Srila Bhakti, this is not about him, but about one Pandit Ramakrishna Das Babaji, that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta had approved of him or something like that. But actually, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, openly criticized him by name in articles in his publications. So there's a lot of trickery going on, and I think that we should be aware of it. A lot. And anyway, there's a lot that could be said. But the conclusion, I would say the practical conclusion, in terms of my experience and advice to you all, would be to stick closely to the instructions of our acharyas, Srila Prabhupada, Srila Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, and not be swayed by sort of romantic tales of instant enlightenment. And Srila Prabhupada, our acharyas, but Srila Prabhupada says it here in the purport, that if we chant the full Panchatattva Maha Mantra, that will free us from offenses, and you could say, bless us to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra without offense. And if we do that, then all of our spiritual desires and aspirations will be fulfilled. Because everything is in the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And by offenseless chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, everything is revealed. And one gets that mercy by serving the members of the Panchatattva, which includes their devotees, Adi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. We also get that blessing. And in that effort, we should not compromise. I'll tell one story. it involves me. It's not good to use myself as an example, but it's for an instructive purpose. So yes. So after the first Delhi Pandal, Srila Prabhupada had all the leaders meet and discuss what should be the plan for expanding the movement in India. And he said first they should discuss the plan and settle on the plan, and then they should decide who will do what. Because if you do it the other way, then individuals may be thinking what they want to do, and that will influence their perspective on what the movement should do. So Srila Prabhupada said, first decide what the movement should do, and then what you should do. And from Delhi, Srila Prabhupada was going to Vrindavan for the first time. But Srila Prabhupada had received an invitation from Dr. Bali, who was the husband of Vaijayanti Mala, who was like a dancer, and maybe she became a film actress. And because he wanted to offer Prabhupada some property in Madras. So Prabhupada asked, who would go to Madras? And nobody was volunteering, because they all wanted to go with Prabhupada to Vrindavan. But somehow I had the idea, there's a story how I got that idea, but I had the idea that, the key to success in spiritual life was to please the spiritual master. I knew he wanted someone to go, so I volunteered. So in Madras, I was meeting people and preaching the way I had heard Srila Prabhupada preach. But soon I found there was an undercurrent of reaction against the way I was preaching. Because in Madras, there are a lot of Mayavadis. Srila Prabhupada writes about it, that traditionally, that there are, say, debates between the Shaivites and Vaishnavites, and, generally the Vaishnavites come out victorious. So there was a class, so-called intellectuals in Madras, who thought that what is this childish arguing, Vishnu supreme, no, Shiva supreme. Actually, they're all just different manifestations of the impersonal one, and the impersonal one is supreme. That was their theory. And so, I was preaching in the usual way. And I started hearing, even from friends and sympathizers, that you shouldn't criticize others. You can state positively whatever you want about your philosophy and your practices and your activities, but don't criticize others. So, I kept hearing this. So at a certain stage I thought, well, maybe Krishna's trying to tell me something. Maybe I should change my approach. And, in the meantime, I'd written Srila Prabhupada, and so I decided, okay, I keep hearing the same thing. Krishna must be trying to tell me something. So I'm going to try a different approach. So I had an appointment with a wealthy industrialist. He had a compound, and his office was there, his factory was there, his residence was there. So, I had my determination, and I did what we usually did. I showed him the pictures of our activities, showed him Back to Godhead magazine, showed him the books, and, took out the life membership form and asked him to become a life member. And he said, "What about Shankaracharya? You said so many things, but you didn't say anything about Shankaracharya. He's one of the great spiritual figures of India." I said, yes, he is. So, what about him? Yeah, like you said, he's one of the great spiritual figures of India. Well, what about him? You haven't said anything. And he just kept probing. He just wouldn't let me escape. And then I had to come out with the whole story. That actually he's Shiva, but he taught this, concocted this veiled form of atheism, and I even took out the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and read, and he kept arguing, and then I thought, well, okay, that's the way it is. So, I put away the pictures, put away the books, took back the membership form, closed my briefcase, and I was ready to leave. So, he walked me to the gate. You were almost at the gate, and he said, "Before you leave, I want you to see my temple room at home." So I thought, oh no. There's going to be a Shiva Linga, and if I don't offer full obeisances, he's going to think I'm sectarian or offensive. So I looked in his eyes do I really have to do this? And he looked me in the eyes, yes, you do. So, okay. So he went into his house. He took me to his temple room. It was quite big as far as home temples go. You could comfortably, probably 5-6 people could and it was white marble, and there was a high platform. And on the platform were deities of Radha and Krishna. I couldn't believe my eyes. I was so happy. Because in Madras, I didn't see any temples of Radha and Krishna. Mainly Vishnu, mostly Vishnu. And then there's one sort of famous temple of Parthasarathi, where the deity of Krishna has a mustache. So I was really happy to see Radha and Krishna. I offered obeisances and prayers. And then I looked at him, what's going on? And then he said that for generations, our family has worshipped Radha and Krishna. We are devotees of Radha and Krishna. He said, I was just testing you. And I am very pleased, and I will be happy to become your life member. So we went back to his office. He filled in the form, paid all at one time and, took the books. And so I was thinking, well, maybe I haven't been doing the wrong thing. But I wasn't sure. Because so many people had been telling me I was. Like one man, a really nice man, Mr. Agarwal. I stayed with many people during that 2 months in Madras. And he said, like, why can't you be like the Gaudiya Mutt? They don't criticize anyone. And every year they have Janmashtami, and thousands of people come. Why can't you be like them? And I thought, would Srila Prabhupada, is that what Srila Prabhupada would want? I wasn't sure, but I didn't think so. But anyway, it's just another example. So I came back. At that time I was guest of the Dasa Prakash people, very strong Madhva family. And there was a letter from Srila Prabhupada, an aerogram, Indian aerogram. So I opened it up, and I couldn't believe the words practically jumped out of the page. And Srila Prabhupada wrote, the fact is that I am the only one in India who is criticizing not only impersonalism and demigod worship, but anything that falls short of complete surrender to Krishna. And he said, my Guru Maharaj never compromised in his preaching, and I will never compromise in my preaching, and none of my disciples should ever compromise in their preaching. We must declare it boldly that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all others are his servants. And unless they are prepared to surrender to Krishna as the Supreme Godhead, all of their efforts for peace and prosperity will fail. So then I thought, this is a confirmation. Now, I should add that preaching boldly without compromise does not necessarily mean that we have to create enemies. And during this whole process, I had met a man who was very well known in religious circles in Madras. His name was Mr. Ramakrishna. And you go around, you meet people. So people were saying, have you met Mr. Ramakrishna? And I said, no, you should meet him. He's a very religious man. And I imagine he was also hearing, have you met the Hare Krishna devotee? They're doing very good work. You should meet him. So eventually I phoned him, and I got an appointment with him. And I was preaching, as I'd generally heard Srila Prabhupada preach. And he started saying, Shiva's supreme. I was saying, no, Krishna's supreme. He's saying, no, Shiva's supreme. And, he was getting angrier, and I was getting angrier. And the whole argument escalated. And ended on a very it was sort of like the only reason, it's like we knew the best thing to do was to separate, because it would have just kept getting worse. So time passed, I kept meeting people. Have you met Mr. Ramakrishna? He's a very religious man. And I think he was hearing the same thing, because even though we had such a bad experience the first time, when I phoned him for another appointment, he immediately agreed. So we, were talking, gradually came to the same point: who's supreme? He was saying Shiva, I was saying Krishna. And we didn't want it to end up the way it did the last time, but it was going in that direction. But then I got an idea. I got a good idea. I said, I'm just like a student. I don't really know that much, but my guru is coming soon to Madras. Why don't you meet him and discuss with him? So he thought that was a great idea, because he would get to meet Srila Prabhupada, and we could avoid another explosive argument without compromising. So Prabhupada came, and Mr. Ramakrishna met him, and he said, I've been having these discussions with Giriraj, who is supreme? Is Vishnu supreme or Shiva supreme? And Srila Prabhupada, so intelligently, changed the entire framework of the discussion. He completely left that platform of who's supreme. And he explained that in Sanskrit, there are two words: puja and bhakti, or seva. And generally, one engages in puja for some material gain, and one engages in bhakti without any desire for any personal gain. And then he said, generally, people approach Krishna in the mood of bhakti, and people approach Shiva in the mood of puja, to get something. So then Mr. Ramakrishna said, well, what if someone approaches Shiva, in the mood of bhakti, not in the mood to get something for himself? And Srila Prabhupada said that's fine. But generally, people approach Shiva to get something material. So Mr. Ramakrishna was satisfied. And the fact is that if one does approach Shiva not in the mood to get something material, Shiva will bring that person to Krishna. I know many cases. One is known to Garuda Prabhu, Professor Barbara Holdridge. But she was sincere. She wasn't like worshiping Shiva to get something. She just didn't know. And as we began to discuss, she became convinced philosophically that Krishna is the supreme. She's like a very intelligent person and an objective scholar, and knew Sanskrit, and she understood from the Bhagavad Gita, from Srimad Bhagavatam, from Satsandarbha, she understood that Krishna was supreme. But she had this sort of pinching in her heart. What about Shiva? Like she didn't want to be unchaste to Shiva. So then we discussed, Vaishnava Namyata Shambhu, how Shiva himself is a Vaishnava, and if any follower of Shiva's becomes a Vaishnava, he'll actually be very pleased. she's one example. Another example is Nityananda Prabhu, who is the temple president in Dallas. I mean, I won't tell the details of his story, but it was similar. He was a Shaivite, and by chance, the ISKCON opened a temple right next to his house, and he was like he was absorbed in Shiva, and he was just very upset. He didn't want this next door, and he would cause trouble, like threaten I'll call the police. But anyway, he also became a devotee of Krishna. But he was also handled very expertly by Tamal Krishna Goswami. Tamal Krishna Goswami met him, and he asked him to write out on a piece of paper his daily schedule. So he did, and Tamal Krishna Goswami looked at it, and he said, I think your schedule will work better if you do this earlier in the day before you do the next thing. So he helped him with his material organization, but that's made him attached to Tamal Krishna Goswami. So preaching really means, you have to be intelligent enough to be able to gauge your audience. Srila Prabhupada had a very good devotee in Bombay named Mr. Sethi, who passed away a few years ago. And the first time Srila Prabhupada met Mr. Sethi, he asked him, what is your daily routine? He said, I get up, I wash my mouth, I have a cup of tea, I read the newspaper, I have a slice of toast, I go to work, I come back, I have have dinner, then take rest. And Srila Prabhupada asked him, what is the difference between you and a pig? and Mr. Sethi thought about it. He said, yeah, actually it's true. I'm living just like an animal. So, yeah. So then Srila Prabhupada said, okay, well, and he engaged him, and Mr. Sethi became a great devotee of Srila Prabhupada. So, yes, this Mahajanayena Gata Sapanta, following the footsteps of the Mahajans, the previous Acharyas, we have to do that. But we also have to be a little intelligent how to do that. Yeah, because once some of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers came to meet him, and they were sort of questioning his engaging young ladies in devotional service, and just things that he had done that were not done in India. Were not done anywhere before him. And after they left, Shrutakirti Prabhu asked Srila Prabhupada, we have faith in you that you've preserved the basic principles, and only adjusted the details. But how do we distinguish what is a basic principle and what is a detail? And Srila Prabhupada closed his eyes and paused for a few moments and said, that requires a little intelligence. So this is something we're faced with quite often, because the world is changing, circumstances are changing, times are changing. So we want to be relevant to people, but at the same time, we don't want to compromise our basic principles. His Holiness Devamrita Swami gave an example. I mean, it was a few years ago, but at that time, the recruitment for the army was down. So the U.S. Army was thinking, like, how can we get more new recruits? And the old values of, like, sacrifice, they weren't appealing to the new crop of eligible young men. Their mood was more like, how can I benefit, So they devised a new advertising promotion. Something like, the slogan was, an army of one. In other words, like, we will tailor your experience in the army just to suit you. Like, you'll be your own army. You don't, like, have to sacrifice for... but then once they get in, then the same values are there. The same core values are there. But it's just a different way of bringing them in. So sometimes we do that. We have to do that. I read this really struck me, a very, very interesting conversation between Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and a very learned and intelligent a friend or follower of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur after Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had left this world. So he approached Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and he said that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur used to, like, share the platform with professional kirtan singers, but you don't. And he quoted the same thing. Shouldn't you be following Bhaktivinoda Thakur? Mahajana Yena Gata Sabantha. Why are you acting different? So, and they would do like lila kirtan. They would do lila kirtan. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that we are all for lila kirtan. If people aren't engaged in lila kirtan, then their unchaste ears will be listening to, want to hear about the leelas of mundane people or just ordinary village gossip. We're all for lila kirtan. He said, yes, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur used to participate in them and you don't. He said, well, there are different types of lila kirtan. And the lila kirtan where there's like discussion of these very high, intimate pastimes of Radha and Krishna are not suitable for the general population, and a lot of these professionals do that. So we're not deviating from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but we're just not encouraging that type of lila kirtan. And then he said that, many of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's followers, they were not on the liberated platform. So, do you mean to say that he was encouraging them to do something that would be bad for them? So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, those who were sincere to follow him, they did not attend these performances. And then he said, well, how do you determine who's sincere or not? He said, we don't have to determine that. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has spoken very extensively about who to hear Harikatha from and who not to hear from, and what subject of Harikatha to hear and what subject not to hear. So if someone's sincere, they'll know that this is not meant for them. And those who are not sincere, they'll go anyway. And then he said, well, do you mean that Bhaktivinoda Thakur was saying one thing and doing something different? That he wasn't practicing what he was preaching? And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur replied that was his mercy, that he knew that there would be people who would not come to the association of pure devotees, would not come to Mayapur Dham without that attraction. So that was his mercy, that even though the singers were professionals and not pure devotees, and even though the leelas were not appropriate, but at least they would have a chance to associate with pure devotees and come to Mayapur Dham, and from there they could make progress. So that was his mercy. It wasn't that he was, preaching one thing in the books and then behaving differently in real life, but that was his mercy for these fallen souls. And then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said that this criticism that you mean like he wasn't practicing what he was preaching, people could accuse us of the same thing. Because it may happen that we allow something to happen, or we don't openly oppose it for some higher purpose. So there are subtleties here. There are subtleties here. But Srila Prabhupada was very kind to us. He made it quite simple and clear. And he pretty much, he did what he wanted us to do, and he didn't do what he didn't want us to do. So we really need to study his books and discuss them. Study his example. Like sometimes that example is more important than precept. Like if you read, it's like chanting the Panchatattva Maha Mantra can be more effective than chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So some disciples asked Srila Prabhupada, why don't we just chant the Panchatattva Maha Mantra? And Srila Prabhupada replied, example is more important than precept. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chanted the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So we follow his example. We chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. But before chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, we chant the Panchatattva Mantra. So, my dear devotees, we are all very fortunate to have come in touch with Srila Prabhupada and this glorious parampara. And as Srila Prabhupada said, if you just, I was going to say, you just hold on to Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet, but the way Srila Prabhupada expressed it, if you just hold on to my dhoti, I will take you back home, back to Godhead. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, are there any questions or comments?